Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the 10-minute report Chargers. If you guys are unfamiliar, which you shouldn't be by now, as this is, we've done several of these 10-minute reports, and we're dropping one every single day of July, so make sure you guys tune in. But if you're new here, we are doing 20 minutes of study plus my already established knowledge for a 10-minute podcast. Please make sure you follow me on Spotify and Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron. Thank you all for listening, and let's jump into this 10-minute report Chargers. Starting off with quarterback Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has been a very good quarterback for the Chargers the past few years. I would say probably put himself into the top 10 conversation of quarterbacks within the league. Herbert should definitely have a contract extension coming soon, whether that be before this season or if it gets pushed till next offseason. It sounds like Herbert and the Chargers are working on it. Herbert does not seem like he at least he hasn't put up any indication to me that he would hold out or, skip or whatever in terms of training camp or the season if he does not receive a contract extension before the 2023 season. But Herbert should be happy about his strong wide receiver room. He's had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams for the past, for his whole career. And, they've kind of dealt with some injuries last year. They should hopefully both be back, healthy, ready to go. As well as they drafted wide receiver Quentin Johnson, out of TCU. And, the three of them should be a very good wide receiver position group for Herbert to be able to, continue to excel. In 10 games last season, Keenan Allen put up just under 800 yards with 4 touchdowns. But in his career, through 10 years so far, 10 seasons, he has 9,300 yards and 52 touchdowns, which is pretty good yards, pretty good stats, averaging almost 1,000 yards per year. And then Mike Williams last year in 13 games had just about 900 yards and 4 touchdowns as well. In his 6-year career, he so far has 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. So again, good numbers. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have been a strong wide receiver duo, since Mike Williams entered the league back in 2017. So look for more of them this year. I'm sure Chargers fans are hoping they stay healthy. I certainly know Justin Herbert is, hoping that they stay healthy as well. And then Quentin Johnson out of TCU in 30 games had 2,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. The Chargers wide receiver room was already strong, and they decided, let's make sure this continues. Keenan Allen's been playing 10 years. We don't really know what's going on with him, if he's going to sign another deal in LA. But they said, we're not taking any risk. I think smart decision by the Chargers to draft a wide receiver. They drafted him 21st overall, which may have been a little soon, first rounder, but, not a bad pick. So, moving on to the running back situation in Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler has voiced very publicly that he would like a contract extension or he would like to be traded if that is, if the Chargers are unwilling to do that. Austin Ekeler has been an incredible running back over the past few years, especially, kind of sneaky in terms of how good he is. Everyone, of course, always knows about Christian McCaffrey. We see Derrick Henry's numbers. We see Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs. Those guys are always talked about. But I feel like Austin Ekeler is kind of always behind those guys in terms of, media or attention. When really he puts up numbers that compete if not exceed some of the numbers that some of those other guys put up. Last season, he had 1,637 scrimmage yards, which ranked him 8th in the league, as well as 18 touchdowns last season, which led the league in touchdowns. During his 6-year career, he has 7,200 scrimmage yards and 63 touchdowns, which I think is pretty good numbers if you're going to be, if you know you can count on your running back to average you, close to 1,200 yards and, 10 touchdowns a season. That's good averages. I would, as a coach, if I was asked for that situation, I would take 10 touchdowns and 1,200 yards out of a starting running back every single year. This year, he will make $6.25 million under his current contract, which I believe it'll be his final year on that. And then if nothing happens with the Chargers, he'll be unrestricted free agent next season. He demanded a trade, like I said, so that's still an option. And then Austin Ekeler did skip OTAs. So, that kind of shows where he's at. He's pretty firm. He's been vocal throughout. Unfortunately, running backs right now are just not getting the love that some of them deserve in terms of a paycheck or contract. As, we've seen it, especially this offseason, especially the last 2 years, 3 years. The running back position is just not valued by, franchises really, I guess, in part because of shorter career length, more injuries, potentially. But, we've seen some guys that are putting up incredible production, not getting the contracts that they may deserve. But before we get too far into that hole, potentially that could be a podcast for another episode. We'll see. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball for the Los Angeles Chargers. They're hoping for a J.C. Jackson bounce-back season. He got injured last season with a patellar injury, I believe, about midway through the season. But even before that, it was not the same J.C. Jackson that we saw in New England in the years prior to him signing with L.A. last offseason. So they're hoping for a bounce back there. Chargers didn't really do a whole lot in the offseason in terms of free agent signings. I would say that their biggest signing was, or maybe their signing that will have the biggest impact, would be signing linebacker Eric Kendricks from Minnesota. He played there for several seasons. They signed him to a 2-year, $13.25 million deal. Last season, Eric Kendricks put up 137 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 6 passes defensed, a sack, and a fumble recovery, along with a touchdown. So Eric Kendricks, one of the better linebackers in the league. He's been one of the better linebackers in the league for a while now, I think. Last season was like his 7th or 8th consecutive season with over 100 tackles, which is good. You would take that out of your middle linebacker. But elsewhere on the defense, Chargers, they kind of had injury riddled and, mediocre performances out of their team last year, especially with their defensive stars trio, I would say, being Joey Bosa, who missed, 3/4 of the season with an injury, a groin injury. So they're hoping he'll be back and strong, healthy, along with Khalil Mack and Derwin James. They're definitely looking for both of those guys to ramp up their production again and get that. That's kind of their defensive big three guys. That could really lead their defense, and help them out, help them win some more games. We obviously know what the offense can do, know what Herbert can do, but we did see and I hate to say it to Chargers fans, but in the playoffs, we all know what happened with the Jaguars, and 27-point lead that got blown in the second half. That ultimately while the offense should have scored more, that ultimately falls on the defense. So, Chargers defense is definitely looking for consistency, going back to kind of towards better numbers for the star players, like I've mentioned a couple times now. Last year, the defensive ranks, while in most categories, they were ranked in the middle of the pack for the season. In most categories, they were ranked 28th in yards allowed, which is just simply not enough to get it done like we saw. And they were able to get the playoff spot because of the offensive production, but the defense ultimately led to their demise. That wraps up our 10 minutes with the Chargers, which just leads me to my record prediction for the Los Angeles Chargers 2023 season. I predict that the Chargers will go 10-7. That's all I have. Thank you guys for listening today. Please make sure to check out my other teams. Follow me here on Spotify at Wedge52 Gridiron Podcast, and follow me on Instagram at Wedge52 Gridiron. Thanks again for listening. Go Ravens.